Sir. Hello. Hello.
Botulinum toxin, as well as different type of fillers. I will not go in much of details because that will just confuse you guys more. So I'll just take 2 minutes to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Deepak Khanna. I'm practicing maxillofacial head and neck and microvascular facial plastic surgeon in Mumbai with training in head and neck oncology and facial plastic surgery. These are my two areas of interest, you can say that. And these are the two areas which I probably till I'm alive, I want to be part of. More, obviously more of oncology because that's my first love. And facial plastic surgery is something which keeps on making me interested in, and I keep on, whenever I get a chance to use my skills on there, right? So I'm attached to a few hospitals, so anytime, anything, if I can help you with, please be welcome and can give me a call. So how does Botox basically works? How does it, what it is, how does it works? What is an applied anatomy? What are the technique based, different techniques used for injections depending on the area? And what are the complications associated, and what do we have as brands? So there is something known as Botox, but people think Botox is the only botulinum toxin. No, it is not. It is a brand name. Just because it was named very sensibly by a company, which I'll not go details in, people just remember botulinum toxin as Botox, but it's just a brand basically. You have Dysport, you have Xeomin, you have different types of botulinum toxins. So what is Botox basically? You should always remember that. Do not get confused. You're bound to get confused if you're a very early student of I don't know which year. But Botox basically is kind of a flaccid paralyzing agent. So how do they make it? They basically make it from a microorganism, which is Clostridium botulinum. It's an anaerobic microorganism and it's a spore forming bacillus. So once they retrieve this from this microorganism through different processes, it is broken down into A, B, C, D subtypes. And for human use, basically the A and the B subtypes are very, very commonly used. The A subtype being very, very potent. So they actually use this, which is obviously used as a main agent in cosmetic facial medicine. The antigenic part of this toxin A is taken care of so that it is totally safe to inject. So usually these Botox injections on the face to correct the wrinkles is a very, very safe practice, and with the minimal kind of you can say complication rate. Where does it act? It acts basically in four types of areas, which are the neuromuscular junctions, the autonomic ganglion, the postganglionic and the preganglionic, sympathetic and parasympathetic fibers. The basic concept of, I'll not go into too much of detail, the basic concept of mechanism of action of Botox is basically it inhibits the release of acetylcholine. So acetylcholine, just because it is not released, it cannot bind to receptors, and there is no kind of a muscular contraction that takes place. And it only works in cases of skeletal muscle. You have to understand this also. So because on your face, all the muscles are the skeletal muscles. So this is how it works basically there, right? So how do you prepare? You get in different forms. The one which is used by physicians and plastic surgeons and dermats and maxwax or whatever ENT surgeons is basically type A. This is the type of Botox which you usually use for cosmetic purposes. There is a type B, type C. They have different roles, which I'll not discuss because then it becomes too much. Now, how do you prepare? So every Botox comes in the form of a powder, and which has to be mixed with normal saline. So depending on the concentration you want to achieve, the constituent, the company gives you along with that a small brochure which will tell you if you mix so much of ml of normal saline, how many Botox per unit you will get. So depending upon the use, depending upon the area where you're going to use it, you can make your own Botox accordingly. But it has to be according to the recommendation of the person or the company whose botulinum toxin you're using. All right. So what about the anatomy in this area? So see, basically Botox, main purpose of Botox is that it is going to just give you a relaxed kind of a look, you know. There are two types of wrinkles on the face. There's something known as a static wrinkle, and there's something known as a functional wrinkle. Static wrinkle you get usually in patients which are very old and all those things, you know, they have past the age of say 60 or 45 or 50 or 55, and the wrinkles are always there, you know, they don't go whether the person is making any kind of expression or not. And functional wrinkles are wrinkles which are seen in young patients due to the movement of the muscles. So they are normal wrinkles. So better results in cases of Botox are seen in patients who want to have a little more relaxed look and at younger ages probably. So these are the candidates, and obviously because these are the functional wrinkles, these are the candidates who will really look better aesthetically when you treat them with Botox. So what are the different muscles? So we are talking about two muscles here. These are your frontalis muscles. The purpose is to lift the eyebrow. You have got a muscle in the center. Okay, what is that muscle called? It is called as the procerus. You have got two corrugator muscles, corrugator supercilii. You have got the orbicularis oculi around your eye. You have got the transverse nares. You have got levator labii alicae nasii here. So all the muscles which are marked, I mean, you have got the levator anguli oris, you've got zygomaticus major, you've got zygomaticus minor, you've got orbicularis oris, you've got mentalis. So you can see in this picture and try to memorize as many of them. Especially if you're a maxillofacial surgeon, you should know about each and every muscle on this picture. Because these muscles, the orientation of these muscles, to know them from where they come, how much, from where to where they go, where are they inserted, whether they are superficial or whether they are deep. This all helps you to inject in these areas. So how do you decide patients? How do you select patients? See, basically, as I already told you, patients with dynamic wrinkles tend to get better results than patients with static wrinkles because they will do much better with the fillers. Deep static lines may not fully respond because the wrinkle has already set in and there is a loss of volume below that wrinkle. So as a result, you might have to inject something below that static wrinkle so that it gets lifted up and, you know, it looks cosmetically better. You have to understand, so what principle I use basically is ABCD, which was taught to me by Dr. Nabil. So what is A? You assess the patient basically. You can, if you want, you guys can write all this. So what is A? A is basically assessment. B is basically the budget, how much the patient wants to spend. So you can go from all the way from Balatero, then come down to Juvederm, then come down to probably some Mona Lisa or whatever. You know, there are many types of fillers depending upon their origin. What is C for? C is basically consideration. What does basically patient wants? What is his main complaints or the complaints, consideration or complaints? So patient wants, doctor, I want to correct the nasolabial fold or the tear trough or the temple hollowness. So accordingly, you have to basically treat those patients. So it all depends basically on what the patient wants. It all depends on how you are accessing the patient. And what is D, device, whether you have enough of armamentarium to inject that patient. So for example, you are more trained in say cannula technique, and and the filler comes with an, you can say an injection, and you do not have a cannula, so you will not be confident while injecting this patient. So accordingly, you have to decide. Plus, do take a very detailed case history, and understand that patient should not have any kind of bleeding disorders, any kind of neuromuscular problems, any form of allergy in the past when she or he was injected, any kind of unexpected realistic expectations. See, some patients who come for cosmetic procedures, they have very unexpected unrealistic rather expectations. So they want to look like somebody, they'll get somebody's picture, or they will morph an image of someone and they will say, okay, I want my face like this. So this is all actually not possible, and you should not even try to entertain such patients, because these patients, if you try to achieve something in them, they will definitely land you in trouble. So let's go area wise and just see what are the peculiarities of each area, and let's discuss them one by one. So first area, so see, Botox basically we use for these horizontal wrinkles and these vertical wrinkles that you get here, okay, forehead area. And when you smile, you get these lateral creases. These are known as the crow's feet. So to treat the forehead and to treat this majorly, obviously we do use them for Marriott lines in smokers, or the lines around the upper lip and all those things. But basically majority of the time we do use them, or mesenteric hypertrophy. So I'll come to all these uses, but let's talk about all the areas session wise or the anatomical zone wise, and we can probably go forward from there. So first area is the procerus. So procerus is this muscle, right in the center. It's a very, so you tell the patient, it's a very thick muscle. So you can see this one which just contracts. So you tell the patient to frown, and this is the muscle which comes right in the center. All right. So this muscle is a very, very strong muscle. So you can inject the patient depending upon how strong. That is purely an assessment of the clinician. You can inject 4 units, you can inject 6 units, but usually 2 to 4 to 6 is the max you inject in this area. Then so let's read about it. So where do we inject it basically? So it is mostly a subcutaneous injection right in the belly, because these all muscles, remember, in the face are just below the dermis. So you don't have to go really deep, because if you cross the muscle, you will be subperiosteal, and then you cannot control the flow of the Botox. So what you do basically, you come right in the center, you tell the patient to contract, you feel the procerus, and boom, you inject. Oh my God, pen was on. So you just basically inject here, right in the belly of the muscle. Now, what about corrugator supercilii? So these are the two muscles. Again, when you frown, these come like this down, like this. So you can actually feel the belly of this and the tail. So these are the two muscles coming right like this down, and when the patient wants to frown, it is the action of these three which actually cause this vertical wrinkles here. So when you tell somebody to frown, this is what is going to happen. All right. Now this muscle also needs around 4 units, something like 2 to 4 units. So what you do, so basically catch hold of the muscle and you inject roughly around, say, probably 2 units here in the tail and 2 units in the body, so that this whole area is taken care of. These injections in this area is also subcutaneous intramuscular. How much dose? Usually 2 to 4 units per side per muscle. All right. So frontalis injection site. So you do not see it. It might look very, very straightforward, but every specialty, whether it's oncology, whether it's plastic surgery, Dr. Panda will tell you that it takes a lot of years to actually understand, as you do more and more patients, what are the complications expected. How could I better assess this patient? So nothing comes by mean of a seminar or a training course. It's basically the years which go into that type of practice. So most important thing when we are talking about forehead area is basically the frontalis muscle has many variations. So in women, it is smaller and thinner. In male, it is larger and can extend right up to the scalp. So you should understand the anatomy of the frontalis for that specific patient. Now, depending on that, you will plan your injection points. The only key in this thing, remember that, is clinical point, I will tell you, which works for me. I just keep around 1 centimeter away from the superior orbital ridge or the upper margin of the eyebrow. But eyebrow can have variation, but the supraorbital ridge does not have any variation. So what you do, you mark 1, 2, 3, 4, two points for both the frontalis, because this is how the muscle is going to come down. And you also mark the area, you tell the patient to look up, and you mark the area of the highest curvature. You usually do not inject lateral to that. All right. So keep around 1 centimeter gap. Why? Because the mechanism of action of Botox is basically 1 centimeter, as in the area affected. So there should not be overdose. If you keep the distance less than 1 centimeter, there can be an overdose, and overdose can cause an over effect. So you have to be very careful. So you cannot inject very, very close. You have to keep at least 1 to 1.5 centimeter between, minimum 1 centimeter between the injection points when you're talking about forehead. And you should definitely know, see, if for example, if you have a very high frontalis, you might have to inject even upwards from your first line. So your first injection site will be 2, 2, 2, and then probably 1, 1, or depending upon, you know, whatever type of frontalis patient has. Lateral crow's feet. So these injections basically are again for patients who do not want these lateral crow's kind of creases to develop when they're laughing or smiling, or, you know, making any kind of an exaggerated facial expression. Lateral crow's feet, the landmarks for these type of injections are basically you have to go 1 centimeter lateral to the lateral orbital rim, 1 to 1.5 centimeter. So you mark a point, midpoint on the lateral orbital rim. Say, for example, say it's this point, and you go equal distance up from this point and down on this point, but keep a distance equal, say 1 centimeter or 8 millimeter, whatever. So you have to have your ruler, and try not to inject too low here, you know, on the cheek. Why? Because you have the origin of a very, very important muscle, you know, not even one, many muscles, which can cause an effect on the upper lip. So your levator anguli oris, your zygomaticus major, and all those things, they just have an origin here. So I will probably show you that picture. So if you inject, so this will be like something like this, probably 1 centimeter. So it will be like 1, 2, 3, but max here, but I'll not go here. So 3 to 4 shots in this area are usually sufficient for the crow's feet to go. These are also subcutaneous injection. Do not go very deep, because you will just cause patient more pain, nothing else. And plus you will not be able to control the flow of Botox. So your plane of injection has to be very, very accurate. Now coming to the lower face, you have this, you know, some patients have a very hyperactive mentalis. How do you know it's very hyperactive? You get this, what you call a lot of wrinkles. When the patient is, what you call, smiling or whatever, you know, is pursing his lips, you get a lot of wrinkles or small depression. This is known as the peau d'orange kind of a picture. In peau d'orange type of a picture, you have to, it doesn't look good, because you don't want many wrinkles here when you're smiling. So what do? So basically you try to relax the mentalis muscle. All right. So how do you relax the mentalis muscle? So again, you divide the chin into 2 parts. All right. So you have got 2 mentalis muscles on the both sides, and you inject. These are little deeper injections. Why? Because the thing is, with gravity, even if it goes down, there is an attachment of investing layer of deep cervical fascia. It will not go in the neck. So you're quite safe. So these are 2 injections which you give, probably 1 centimeter lateral to the midline of the lower lip, and do feel the muscles before you inject them. All right. So this is for the mentalis. I'll take the questions at the end of Botox session. So Dr. Chirag is sending me few. I'll just take them at the end. So what are the other areas where we can inject them? So, you know, again, when you frown, you get these all very, very cross wrinkles, and they don't look, they make you look very old, and, you know, you are not happy with it. So the nasal rhytids are one more area where basically you, if you inject Botox very carefully, you can get rid of them. So what are the important landmarks? See, the problem with this upper part of the nose is there are 2 dorsal nasal vessels that run along it. All right. So you can probably give one shot. Again, I mean, if you have not given in Procerus, you can just inject in the belly of the Procerus and give 2 shots very close to it, but do not go very down here in this area, because you have blood vessels. You can have an intra-arterial injection, which can cause problems. All right. So you have to know your anatomy extremely, and you are basically injecting on transverse nares. So transverse nares is going to be like this. So you do not go down here. And what else is here? It is levator labii alicanesi. So if you inject in levator labii alicanesi, what will happen? The upper lip will fold down like this. So it's a problem. And Botox you cannot reverse. This is the biggest problem with Botox, for at least the duration is over. All right, lateral brow elevation. It's not needed for you to know this, but see, some patients do come for a specific cause. They're okay with this, but they want a lateral brow up. So these are the landmarks. Target muscle is frontalis. So the most lateral injection site would be around, say, 1 to 1.5 centimeter medial to the medial temporal fusion line. Please read your anatomy very, very well. All right. So you place around right here in the tail of the eyebrow. Basically, you try to place around 2 units, or probably, yeah, 2 units should be more than enough. And that does give patients a satisfactory result. Perioral line. So usually patients who are very hardcore smokers, they have got all these small perioral lines, So these patients, you can treat them by both the ways. If the patient is little young and a heavy smoker, you can try with Botox. But if you feel they are more of static wrinkles, then you can treat these patients with fillers. All right. Okay. So what about Marriott lines? So Marriott lines are lines which originate somewhere here. So this, again, it's very common with old age. These are very common wrinkles in heavy smokers. Again, depending upon the type of wrinkle, you can treat it both the ways. You can treat it with Botox, or you can treat it with filler. The muscle in which you're going to inject this is a depressor anguli oris, but do remember that you have to inject equal on both the sides. If you do not inject equal, your lip will turn. All right, and it will look very, very unaesthetic. So equal dose, equal distance from the midline. Usually midline helps you because you can measure and you can actually decide almost the same site where you can inject on both the sides, and it should look quite pleasing to the eyes. All right, fair enough. So this is okay, not very important. So again, this is injection site for perioral area. You do not inject close to the upper lip. You at least leave around 5 to 6 millimeters and inject multiple two units. Probably one unit is also sufficient depending upon how strong the muscle of the patient is. Mesenteric injections. Now these injections basically are indicated for patients who have this bruxism habit. They are very hypertrophied masseter. Now remember that masseter is a very strong muscle. All right. So before you start injecting, you have to mark the muscle. So when you tell the patient to clench the teeth, you can palpate the muscle. So you mark the anterior border, you mark the inferior border, you mark the superior border, you mark the posterior border. And once you have all the markings, I hope so I have not marked myself. So once you have marked all the markings, then you just feel the most strongest part of the muscle that you can palpate and see. You tell the patient to clench, and as soon as the patient will clench, you will see this extremely one specific area which will be stronger than the other area. So that area needs more dosage. You can inject somewhere around 10 units in that area, right? 10 to 12 to even 15 if the patient is very strong. And around that area, in an equal distance, you can give more 8 units to 10 units, depending upon how much relaxation you want. And same side and same thing on the other side. But remember that the muscles usually are not equal on both the sides. So somebody might have a hypertrophied muscle on one side, and the other side will be the muscle might be normal, and the other guy might be having the other way around. So it's very rare that you will be using same kind of you can say dose on both the sides. So you have to always remember when you're injecting Botox or fillers, undercorrect. So if you feel patient requires say around 10 units, just give 8. We are going to call this patient very soon, so 3 to 4 days just for a reval. And in case he needs a touch-up, that time you can probably do the needful. These are some very basic results, which I could just put in. So what are the contraindications? See this, how much effect it has. So I do have more cases also, but we will not go into too much detail, just an introduction lecture. So I'll just stick to the main points so that you get a brief idea what it is all about. So what are the contraindications? See, you never inject in patients, just remember 4 or 5 things, who have bleeding disorders. Why don't you inject? Because when you do multiple pricks in these patients, what can it lead to? It can lead to lot of ecchymosis and subcutaneous pinpoint bleeds, which will itself cause lot of bruising, which patient does not like because this patient has come for a cosmetic procedure. So patients on aspirin cardiac patients taking clopidogrel, any kind of antiplatelet therapy, patient on renal dialysis, on anticoagulant therapy. All these patients basically are kind of a contraindicated keloid formation. You do not want to cause a keloid, small keloid to form. Patients who are breastfeeding, patients who are pregnant, all these are basically contraindicated. Or patient who has a neuromuscular disorder. It can be myasthenia gravis, it can be Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, whatever. Like, you know, there are many like this. So depending on these factors, you basically take a very nice detailed case history and you decide, I mean, which are your exact, which are the safest patients to inject. All right. Chirag, why it's not moving? I think Chirag is, okay.
Yes, sir. Everything is okay. I didn't do anything.
Chirag is trying to play some games with me. All right. So
Keep
what are the
continuing.
trade names with which Botox is available? You get Botox in the name of Botox, as Dysport, as Xeomin. I personally use Dysport and Xeomin, and I'm very big fan of Merce because, you know, these people make some really good stuff. So Xeomin is their compound. My experience is mostly with Xeomin. Okay, so what are the injection reactions? You can have bruising, ecchymosis, vasovagal attack. So if a young girl comes to you and she wants Botox, I can tell you one thing. I mean, the youngest patient I had was around 22 years old girl. So patients, it's not necessary you have to be old for these kind of treatments. See, rather than going to a beautician and putting this extra unnecessary skin spoiling makeup, which they tell you herbal, it's not. You rather go to a clinician and get your thing sorted. It will cost you much cheaper on a long run. Botox takes care of your problems for at least 5 to 6 months on an average, depending upon the product and all that things. And even if you are reusing Botox or after 5 to 6 months, you are going to find it very comfortable and your face is not going to change. The makeup is going to go as soon as the function is over or whatever. But still in India, it's very unfortunate, you know, people rather go for temporary things and, you know, toxic things for their skin. Botox is not toxic, all right? Botox, for that matter, Dr. Panda, me and Karthik, we have been trained by the same guy. We have seen that, you know, right from we saw in Lebanon, basically, we saw patients right from the age of, I will say 21 till 72, which used to come to Dr. Nabil for Botox. So, and fillers also. So there's nothing like age or how do I look. If you want to look better, you have to little invest on yourself. And trust me, they are not that expensive now, the way they were before. So that kind of a you can say mind setup. Oh my God, Botox. You know, don't get scared. Botox is nothing. They're going to charge you 300 to 400 per unit. How much will that cost? Hardly anything if you count and divide by the number of months. So you should have scientific knowledge, and if you are recommending, you should know what you're recommending, and accordingly go with it. So what are the other problems? Obviously, the one of the issues associated with younger group of patients or older group of patients is that they get scared of needles. See, these are hypodermic needles. They are very fine needles. They do not cause much of pain. You will hardly feel the prick. It's just one small prick that you feel, and after that things are very fine. You know, it does depend upon the technique the injector is using. So more experience the injector, less painful it is. You can use cold ice, you can use amla cream, that is the topical anesthetic cream. You can use a vibrator, you know, small vibrators you get like this. You use, what happens it, according to the gate control theory, the vibrations will try to go faster, you know, depending upon the fibers. I don't want to go to detail in all this. So you have 3-4 ways to minimize that discomfort to the patient. All right. Okay. Chirag. Okay, fine. So what are the undesired side effects? See, you can get hypersensitivity reactions. You can get toxicity if you inject into the blood. You get blepharotosis, that is dropping of the upper eyelid. If you inject very close to what muscle? There is a muscle in the upper eyelid known as levator muscle. All right. Levator muscle is basically, it gets inserted to the tarsal plate of the upper eyelid. You should know the anatomy very well. So I am very clear in this, that if you know the anatomy, if you're qualified enough, then only inject. These things are not for people who are not qualified enough to inject. All right, let me be very clear on that. So this levator muscle basically has some fibers which are little superficial in this area of the mid part of the eyebrow. So if you're injecting very close to this eyebrow, what can happen? This can just go and sink down and cause kind of a relaxation of the levator muscle. And if the levator muscle is relaxed, what will it cause? It will cause ptosis. The levator will not be able to pull the eyelid up and the eyelid will drop. And this ptosis cannot be reversed. That's a big problem. All right. So do not inject unless you don't know where, unless you don't understand the depth of your injections, unless you are qualified and trained and your knowledge is enough to inject. This practice of Botox filler should not be taken into consideration just because somebody told you to. All right, it's good to learn and all, it's fine, but when you talk about patients, my personal opinion is you should know your anatomy very, very well, and unless you don't know your anatomy, you should not inject. It's very clear. All right, so this will happen if you do not know, if you don't know a way to inject. You might inject too medial, you might inject too lateral, or you might inject too much here. So sometimes you get this kind of a Mephisto look, you know, Dr. Spook. So this type of, imagine a young girl comes to you and you give her this. So it is very important to control the site, the dose, as well as the depth of injection when you're injecting in the forehead for your forehead lines and the crow's feet. This is a diagram that shows how to inject with the it's an angulation technique. So just remember 1 to 1.5 centimeter away. So you can, it makes an angle, and this is how you basically in that, along that angle you can inject. So 30 degree both up and down. All right. You can also use Botox for this neck skin lines. You know, usually you see them in old patients, the platysmal bands we call them. The platysmal bands, basically they are very tough bands, you know, and they don't look good. So people who are conscious about them, they can go and just get them. But there are multiple, again, the principles do remain same. These are subcutaneous injection, because if you know the anatomy of the neck, you have got the skin, the epidermis, you've got subcutaneous fat, and below the subcutaneous fat, you have platysma, and below the platysma, you have a nesting layer of deep cervical fascia. And below that is you have got again fat, and then you have the muscle. So basically, these patients, you will be injecting very superficial. You will hold one band and then inject. Keep 1 centimeter distance between your injections, and then decide, plan accordingly. The distance should be equal on all the sides so that the effect is good. Obviously, you can do touch-up. These are again the so-called issues that supratrochlear artery injury. There are two. There is a foramen here on the medial aspect of the upper eyebrow, supratrochlear and the supraorbital. There are two foramens. So you should know anatomy. So you can cause all these problems. Okay, diffusion. When you do not inject in a proper plane, you are either mostly you are too deep or too superficial. The Botox will flow. It will flow to areas which you don't like, and it will cause paralysis of the closest muscle, which comes in touch with this Botox. All right. So what do you tell your patients once you finish your Botox? You tell them to remain upright, no golf, no tennis, no jogging, nothing for at least, I tell my patients, a week. All right. So this is safe period. And immediately also they should just not lie down. They should not go for a beautician massage or whatever you call it, because the Botox has to bind with the receptors, and it takes time to bind to those receptors. And if you, before it has bounded to those receptors and you just move it, basically just below your skin, it is going to go to some place where you don't like it. So you have to be very, very careful. There is basically a form which we make, and this is a pre-printed form with all the instructions, and we tell the patients to strictly follow them. Do not wear a headband or a hat, you know, refrain from using ibuprofen, fish oils. All this can cause bleeding. That's why we don't want much of ecchymosis. All right, washing face, makeup, all this not allowed for at least 48 hours, minimum 24 to 48 hours. What if the patient develops bruising? Just tell the patient to use ice. That's it. You don't have to bother. Just tell the patient to use ice. He can take, or he or she can take anti-inflammatories, and this should sort it out. All right. So one thing you remember once you're injecting Botox, that Botox takes time. You know, it takes around 7 to 10 days, roughly 7 to 8 days to come into its actual shape. So you can either call your patients after 1 week or 10 days and see if the patient actually needs touch up. So for example, you feel this eyebrow is looking little up and this is down, and accordingly you can just either inject on lateral to this eyebrow or more on this side and make the other eyebrow look. So these are all adjustments which you do for the patient, and you tell this to the patient when the patient comes for consultation. It is not something you're going to hide from the patient. So you're going to tell the patient that you will need a touch up after 7 to 10 days. So when the patient comes, you can actually do it as and when required. All right, Chirag, you can come online now. So we have finished with the Botox.
Hi, sir.
Yeah.
Yes. So there were a few questions. If you
Yeah.
don't.
No, tell me, please.
Even Akshay Deshpande sir is online.
Okay. Sorry, Akshay sir is there online.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Akshay sir. Hi, Arun sir.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, sir. So there
Bolo.
was one question which people are asking, that some plastic surgeons encourage younger patients in their 20s to go for preventive Botox, while other surgeons claim it is not beneficial to treat wrinkles before they appear. What is your take on this?
So there is a lot of articles and literature on that, but there is no meta-analysis. I think there is only one study, if I remember, from an Italian group, which compared the different types of wrinkles with different age groups, but they have not come to a conclusion. So it's all on what you think, basically. You know, there is nothing. See, we have to be scientifically, we should have a scientifically evident data before we can say, okay, this is right and this is wrong. In today's world, you cannot say what you feel, because that can be an experience of just say 50 patients or 100, while somebody else has seen some 200 or 2000 patients. Like Nabil used to do 20 per day, 15. I mean, Dr. Arun will tell you his major practices. So he does some 6,000 a month. So there is a variation, all right, but there's no hard and fast rule in that.
Arun sir, what is your take on this if you're online, sir?
See, we practice in a country where more than science, we have to be very practical.
Yeah.
Imagine a patient who comes to you at the age of 20 or 25, whatever you mentioned. You mean to say he is going to come back to you every 3 months, right from the age of 25 till age 50, every 3 months, and practically spending about 18,000 every 3 months? I don't think it is practically possible in our country. First, number one. Number two is, as Dr. Deepak mentioned, there are a couple of studies. They mention, yes, if you start early, definitely the wrinkles are going to be less, because what is happening is you are relaxing the muscles. So the amount of toxins which will be required at a later part of the life to relax the muscles will be less, much less. But imagine a situation wherein are you going to see the patient every 3 months for the next 25 years, which is practically impossible. I don't think that is practically possible. So on a practical note, I mean, on a scientific note, it could be possible that at a later stage, after 20 years, maybe the amount of toxin which will be required will be less. But on a practical note, I don't think you'll have a patient to come to see you every 3 to 4 months for the next 20, 25 years.
So, sir, in this case, what would you recommend? Like, if a person who's 20-year-old would want that their skin should remain healthy even at the age of 45, wrinkle-free, what would you recommend that they take a preventive step at this point of time? Maybe surgical, maybe go to a clinician, I don't know.
So there is a concept of something called as a micro Botox, which is again a long story to talk on. But then there are many other things to keep your skin alive, keep your skin natural. Not only wrinkles, there are many other things which kind of take care of the aging process, reversing the signs of aging. Like inducing collagen, keeping your skin in a better shape, preventing them, taking antioxidants, and many things which can actually keep you from aging process. Dr. Deepak, I think I would like to add something here, since I guess all the people here around in the forum is basically they are all dentists. A few indications of botulinum toxin could be, which will be helpful for them, is basically gummy smile. One thing is that. Which is of prime importance, and dentists are going to have patients for gummy smile. That's number one.
Who don't want surgery. Right.
Who don't want surgery. That's number one. Number two is people like trigeminal neuralgia is one condition wherein the patients are going to come to you or a neurosurgeon. So maxillofacial surgeons are going to see a lot of patients for neuralgia, trigeminal neuralgia. Third thing is MPTS, myofascial pain dysfunction syndrome. as maxillofacial surgeons, we are going to see a lot of patients for MPDS. As dentists, you're going to see a lot of patients who are going to go for immediate loading implants. So, these are the other indications. Bruxism is another indication. Since we are talking about dentists who are there in this forum, these are a few indications which should be, which can be, kind of uh, taken up as dentists. I mean, if you guys want to start off the practice and you don't want to jump into forehead lines, frown lines, as Dr. Deepak was mentioning. So these areas could be good areas to start with, because patients will be more than happy and more than ready to, kind of accept your treatment. What do you say, Dr. Deepak?
I agree to you, sir. And my personal thing on this is very straight. It's my personal thing. I will take an opinion of yours also. You need training. Minimum training is being at least a maxillofacial surgeon, because at least you know the anatomy. You have an idea about the face. You know the anatomy of the osteology of the skull. You know the anatomy of the muscles. You know about origin. You know nerve. You know blood. You know at most 80% to 90% of the things. But and as far as I know, and I have seen in our country, see, abroad nurses also inject, abroad dentists also inject, but in our country, Dental Council of India and Medical Council of India, as far as I know, does not allow still now dentists to inject. So if you want to be an injector in future, you need to do your masters and then train after that for good time with a person who has a good load, and then probably start injecting. But you should not try this. I mean, I see at many forums, sir also knows, in Delhi and all this Haryana and all those things. Like, I mean, I'm not against any subspecialty, whatever, but endodontists and all are injecting or whatever. So this is very scary, because in fillers talk, you can make the patient blind if you don't know what you're doing. Like, sir knows that we have an article with Nabil, Karthik, me, and Dr. Carmen from Spain. So we did a research on correcting of tear trough. It's published in American Society Journal of Cosmetic Surgery. Very, very good journal, in which we saw there are more than 30 patients who ultimately landed with blindness till last year, 30 patients, and we could not revive their eyesight, vision. It's a decent number, 30 to 40 patients. There was none of them recovered because the injector injected into the angular vein. He was too close to the lateral wall of the nose. So you should know you have to have control over your anatomy. It's very important. What do you think, Panda sir?
No, you're true. You're very true. Very right.
See, it just looks like an injection, but sir has probably definitely more patients than me, because I do a lot of cancer work also. So whatever patients your hands should know, and this comes with experience and training. You got to train. There is no shortcut in all these things.
Sir, there is another question where people are asking, is there a role of Botox in rhinoplasty?
Role of?
Botox in rhinoplasty.
Botox nahi hai, filler hai. There is a role of filler in, yeah. So people who do not want any surgery, who have a depressed nasal bone or whatever, you can augment it by using fillers for nasal. Dr. Panda also can, discuss on that if you want. So it's a non-surgical rhinoplasty, it is called. So you can augment the radix, you can augment the nasofrontal angle, you can augment the lateral alar cartilages. Okay, but you have to be very good in this area, especially the tip of the nose. It's a very dangerous area, because it is one of the danger zones.
There is something, I'll just interfere here. So the person whoever is told, so basically there is something called as a non-surgical rhinoplasty, as this guy mentioned. So non-surgical rhinoplasty takes into consideration that we relax the muscles and we augment certain part of the nose, which the patient doesn't want to go in for surgery. So botulinum toxin as such is basically along with fillers to augment the dorsum of the nose and the tip of the nose. It is the botulinum toxin which is actually used on the depressor septi muscle. Basically, this is a muscle which kind of anchors the nose. I mean, it puts the tip of the nose down. So basically, depressor septi nasi is also relaxed and paralyzed with botulinum toxin, so that the tip of the nose, it is allowed to pick up. So if you want to adjust the tip of the nose, you combine fillers on the tip of the nose and also relax the depressor septi nasi, and also use toxins the fillers on the dorsum of the nose to augment that part of the nose. So basically, it is a combined process to do something called as a non-surgical rhinoplasty. That is what I personally feel.
So, sir, we'll take one last question, which is that what are the other options we have other than Botox if we want the result to last longer than 3 to 6 months, as that is the life of a Botox?
Okay, so you can answer, sir. Come on.
No, what is that? I didn't get it.
How
Okay,
can
so
we
the question
prolong the result
for-
of the Botox?
Yeah, how can we prolong the result of Botox, and what are the other options if we want something long term? Then what are the other options other than Botox? So
I don't think there is anything which can relax the muscles.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's nothing.
yeah, and how can we prolong the effect of Botox? Is there any technique or something which you can do to prolong the life of that Botox, which is 3 to 6 months? Maybe I can prolong it by 10-20%. Panda, sir?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, sir. So I think we've, sir, there was Deepak, sir.
Mm.
Yeah, there's just one thing where someone asked that how do we actually understand the depth of the injection? Like subcutaneous was fine, but what about when we want to go for mentalis and go a little deeper? Like how do you adjust?
Yeah, so it's just like infiltration. You hit the bone and come little up. If you're going for a deeper injection, but then see, more deeper you will go and more close to periosteum, it is more sensitive to pain. These patients, these cosmetic patients are not going to take it very easily, you know. So you have to, and each area may the site or the injection varies, especially for fillers. Botox is mostly subcutaneous, most of the areas, but especially for fillers, it's a different ball game altogether, you know. And there are a lot of studies done by a Spanish group, by an American Vegas group, along with Dr. Joe Nyamtu and all these guys, you know, big shots. There's a guy in Las Vegas. These all fellows have actually, they've studied the sections of the skin and observed these fillers. And it also depends on the angulation, you know, different areas need different angulation. So there's a lot of science involved there. It is not that's what it needs, a lot of experience. But Botox is mostly subcutaneous, most of the places.
Okay.
Except for the mentalis area.
Okay.
Chirag, one more question.
How
That
many
last
units
question.
of Botox are injected in the masseter muscle?
Oh, it can be depending on how a person goes to the gym or not. I don't go to gym. I play tennis. For me, it will be hardly 8 units. But if Saurabh is going or something and is lifting too much of load, so probably 10 to 12. But it can go right from 15 units to anything. Depends.
Okay.
And it is not equal on both the sides. So this masseter can be smaller or hypertrophic. The other might be not that hypertrophic. It can vary. There are variations in that. Okay.
Saurabh, you wanted to ask something?
Sir, what is the range of safest dose of Botox?
So that depends on the weight of the patient. That depends on what you call it, the build on the patient. So there are calculations. It's just like local anesthesia.
Okay, sir. One more question is there from the audience. Can Botox injections lead to a muscle atrophy due to excessive use?
So there is something known as tachyphylaxis. Yeah, there are papers which have been presented which talk about degenerativeness of the muscle due to over usage of Botox. And the patients have been seen not to respond who use Botox for like years. In some of the patients, they develop kind of a tachyphylaxia, means though you are injecting, so they need a higher concentration of Botox and they need more units for Botox dose, obviously taking part of the toxic dose.
No, sir. Question is specifically if it will lead to muscle atrophy or no.
Degenerative. Muscle degeneration. Yeah, there are papers.
Okay.
Panda sir also can comment on that.
Okay. Vaibhav sir has also come on board.
Okay, Arun Panda sir, one question is there. Hello.
Yeah, tell me.
Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes,
so
yes.
people are asking what are the legal consideration for the maxillofacial surgeon or dentist to perform Botox on the patient, because since it comes under plastic surgery mainly, so what are the current things?
See, for maxillofacials, I don't think there is any issue
Okay.
because it is there in your Dental Council of India curriculum. So
Okay, so Dental Council of India has given green signal for maxillofacial surgeons, and what about the general dentist?
what I am
or
asking is, it is there in your curriculum. What is green signal?
Okay.
What is red signal? I do not understand that, but it is typically there in your Dental Council of India course of oral maxillofacial surgery. That you
PG
can
course,
use all
yeah.
this PG course.
Hmm.
Talking about the
Okay.
general dentist, so as Dr.
Hmm.
Deepak was mentioning, a lot of other countries, US, UK, Australia, everywhere dentists and the nurses, they keep on injecting. So at this point of time, there are a lot of injectors from the dental background who are doing these procedures in our country. And actually, there has been issues from other specialities. Definitely, yes, for the dentists. We are working on it, and we are actually working strongly for the, I mean, dental dentists, at least for injection of toxins for the dental usage, at least, for a gummy smile or masseter
Okay.
atrophy, for going in for implants, I mean, the full mouth implants and things like that, which can be performed after, as Dr. Deepak mentioned, after proper training and understanding the proper anatomy and things like that. So we're working on it. Let's see how it goes. Dr. Weber, if
Okay.
you want to comment, if he's around.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Hello,
Dr.
sir.
Vaibhav?
Hi. Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Can you hear us?
Hey, hi guys, I can hear you.
Hi, sir. How are you doing?
Hi, sir.
Fine, 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 all great.
So,
Please
what is
go on.
your
I think
opinion on the legality of Botox and fillers for dentists?
I think what Panda sir said is absolutely correct. For maxillofacial surgeon, it is allowed, and apart from that, no other specialty of dentistry, and for the general dentist, it is not allowed.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because
Thank you, sir.
see, the whole purpose of medicine is to make things good for people. It is not that I don't know how much a perio guy or whatever endo people will know about anatomy, and because you have to understand aging. You have to understand how these skeletal tissues resorb with age. You have to understand the vessels which go into it, which come out, the branches they give. I think in our country, the way the courses are, whatever the graduation courses, I will not send my, I mean, no hard feelings, but it's it's better not to allow also these guys. They need more training, and you need at least a specialization. Otherwise, you will harm the patient, which is not right. I totally support this.
So Deepak, sir, we'll come back to the questions later.
Right.
It's 5 o'clock. I think we can, if you want, we can take a 5-minute break.
No breaks, please, Chirag. I need.
Okay. So let's start with the facial rejuvenation with fillers. Sir, will you be talking about fat grafting in this as well?
No. That's a total different.
Okay. So just touch about fat grafting so that people know that there is something.
I can talk if somebody has a question about it, but not on, because that is a very big topic. Fat grafting.
So just touch on it. How are they different from fillers and the kind of
All right,
indication?
we'll do that when time comes. All right. So
Okay.
can you mobilize my PPT? I'm not able to move it.
Sir, yeah, okay. Bye, sir.
Fine. So let's talk about the second and the last part of our presentation today. So the question is fillers. Okay. So please understand one thing which we probably did not discuss much in details. You have to understand the process of aging. So there was a study, I think, which was a group, Rajiv group in New York or something. He did a study based on cadavers and all those things, and he came to a conclusion that basically the fat, see, your face is full of fat pockets. There is malar, there is submalar, there is mentalis, there is buccal fat pad. There are different fat pads. There's temporal fat pads. So these are areas where you have good deposit of. There is a subocular, oculi fat. There is a supraocular, SUF, and all those things. So there are many pockets of fats in your face. So as you grow older, these pockets start to become empty. All right. So what happens? The face starts to fall down. Plus, there are something known as the retaining ligaments. Now, what are these retaining ligaments? There are different groups. There's something known as the mandibular retaining ligament. There's something known as the malar retaining ligament. There is something known as the masseteric retaining ligaments. The purpose of these retaining ligaments is basically to hold the skin in its place. But with age, they tend to become wavy. What other changes occur in the skin? The skin loses its hyaluronic acid, which is very important constituent of the connective tissue. what other things happening? Collagen is lost. So basically your fat is lost, your collagen is lost. So you start to, and with gravity, the face starts to become what can be say, sag. You know, there is a sagging which is seen. And there is something known as the Og's curve. So what is Og's curve? So there is a phi test, there is a Og's curve. So I'll not go into much of details of all these things. Basically, it's a S-shaped curve that is seen when you look on a face from the side. So it shows you of youth, but and plus the triangle, the aesthetic triangle which a person has in youth. So if you connect the two pupillary lines and you connect the symphysis menta, you get this inverted triangle. It's a youthful face, but as you age, it becomes squarish. You know, you start getting jowls and you get deepened nasolabial folds. So this all starts to happening. So what is actually happening? The thing is, the bones are getting remodeled with age. The fat pads, which are all over the face, they are getting resorbed. The retaining ligaments are becoming more and more wavy. What else is happening? The collagen is getting lost. It is becoming, there is a lot of fibrosis and there's no new collagen. What else is happening? The glands in your skin, they are producing less and less of sebum. So, you know, the skin becomes very, very, you can say rough. There's less of oil in the skin, and that's how you start looking old. So all these factors can be taken care with two modalities at present. There are many modalities, but basic two modalities. Either in the form of grafts, you have to replenish these pockets of fat from where the fat has gone. So what are these options we have? One is a filler and one other fat grafts. I'll just speak about fillers today. So let's go with fillers. So what are these? These are basically used for soft tissue augmentation. Okay, Chirag, you can take the questions if they are coming to you. Soft tissue augmentation with aging, all right, due to loss of part of subcutaneous fat, basically. So fillers are an effective tool of facial rejuvenation, either as a standalone treatment or in a combination of other procedures like laser and Botox. So what are the most common type of fillers that are used in today's world? They are hyaluronic, HA, hyaluronic acid fillers. So Dr. Panda and again Karthik and me, Dr. Nabil, we went to him and we trained under him for a good time. And we found that, you know, they are very, very safe fillers. We had a huge load of patients, like 15 to 20 per day, 15, at least 12 to 15 filler patients used to be there. And, you know, people inject left, right, and center in Middle East. And I think in US also and Europe. More in Middle East probably, and then it comes America and all that, and then probably Europe. But in Middle East, it is like a phenomena. So they are safe, obviously. But again, the thing, there are a lot of factors that come into picture when you talk about rejuvenation while using fillers. Most important factor is the cost. The good fillers are expensive. So we will discuss about all these things. Chirag, can you just, it's not, okay, yeah. So what are the different classifications? Broad, based, broad, the fillers are dependent, can be classified on whether they are temporary, whether they are semi-permanent or permanent. So the best ones which are used, most of them are usually nowadays temporary and biodegradable fillers. So more shorter the duration of action of filler. Now people say, doctor, and there is a girl who came to me once and said, give me something permanent for your lips. I don't want to come and see you again. So more longer base filler you use, like polymethyl methacrylate, like silicone, there are more chances of complications associated with fillers. Hyaluronic acid fillers are very, very good fillers. They have hardly any, you know, hardly percentage wise, hardly, I think most of the papers, 1.25 to 2.5% complication rates associated with them. Or a semi-permanent filler. If you want to really increase the duration of action, you can add a semi-permeable, semi-permanent filler. But best for now, safety-wise, are temporary fillers. So this is one way. Depending on where you're injecting, they can be dermal. Now here, the depth comes into picture. They can be subdermal or they can be supraperiosteal, based on their origin. Where are you getting them from? So they can be heterografts like bovine, hyaluronic acid, or procaine. They can be allografts like human-derived collagen, autografts, synthetic material. So now we come to a factor that what are the areas basically which we can treat by using these fillers. So you can treat, the first thing I told you in my topic was about static wrinkles. In old patients where you feel they are not, the wrinkles are not caused by basically the movement of the muscles, but they are rather caused by something due to age. You know, they're fixed wrinkles. They remain whether the patient is frowning or not, or patient is talking or not. So these static folds of skin or wrinkles can be treated by fillers. You can treat your upper lip, lower lip. You can treat different deformities using fillers. You can treat scars, breast, buttock, whatever, buttock augmentation that does not comes in your preview. Let me be very clear. Periocular areas, tear troughs, so temple area, nasolabial folds, so all these areas. So all these areas are areas treated. So this is a pictorial, your cheeks, see this. You can treat your hollowness over in the area of eyebrow, temple, cheek, jaw lines. Okay, you can define your jaw lines using fillers. You can treat this marronate area. See, there's a loss of fat here. You can treat your chin. If somebody wants a genioplasty but non-surgical, you can give him a nice chin just by injecting a good amount of subperiosteal filler in this area. So these are the indications of fillers in the facial region. What are the contraindications? If somebody is allergic to hyaluronic acid, synthetic hyaluronic, if he has an she has an autoimmune disease, there is a history of the patient had already gone to some facial cosmetic physician or a surgeon or any kind of a specialist, and there was a reaction. So you have to take a history in a good detail. He or she has a keloid formation history. So all these patients are basically contraindications. Please take a good medical history, do the skin graft, counsel the patients, and take some time. See, other specialties, you can have a consult for like 15-20 minutes to 25 minutes, and it's more than enough. I have seen, in cosmetics, I mean, Dr. Panda and Karthik, if you would have been here, would have accepted this fact. I used to see these people talking to patients for 1.5 hours before probably, before deciding on rhinoplasty, or sometimes 2 hours also, explaining them, showing them pictures. So you have to make sure that you do not promise something which is not achievable, promise something which patient wants you to promise. So you have to give them a very realistic approach, and you never tell these patients, I want to make you look good. You are not God. You tell these patients that you are going to treat them to look better. So if you tell them, I'm going to treat you to look better, it's much better than telling them, I will make you look like Kim Kardashian or Julia Roberts or whatever. I mean, although she's become very old now, whatever, Penelope Cruz. So it's all wrong. You have to understand these are treatments. Abroad, this is not some beautician thing. This is treatment for aging. That's why it's called as rejuvenation. So, and plus, a very important part of these things is pictures. You have to click a lot of photographs in all profile views, the worms view, the sky view. So your photograph, you should have a good camera with a stand. You should have a good backdrop. And this record should be kept in your laptop with the patient's name, date, everything, because these patients can come anytime and just cause a lot of trouble to you. All right. So what are the intraoperative preparation of a patient in whom you're going to inject? So you should keep your instruments ready. You can use a Prilox, that is a topical anesthetic cream. You can use local anesthesia, especially when you're treating upper lip, because see, the lips are very sensitive. So it's a good habit to give a mucosal infiltration before you're treating upper lips or the lower lip for that matter, because the lip is very sensitive. Or patient is to be, see, all these patients whom you're treating, there should be good light. The position of the patient should be right. All right. It should be against gravity. All right. So that you can actually see the profiling of the patient. All the fillers which come into market, they come with a pre-filled syringe. All right. So with a 26 to 32 gauge needle. So you need not to bother. Now it depends, like, I inject with a cannula. So some people might be comfortable with a needle. It's all okay, depends on how you are trained. But cannulas are safer because, the intraarterial chances of injection are very less when you're using a cannula. So the syringe should be levered over the thumb. It's a simple injection technique. There are different types of techniques. There's something known as fanning. there's something known as a linear technique, and there's something known as cross hatching. So there are three basic techniques that I'll discuss. So you should not be too superficial, you should not be too deep. So when you're injecting fillers, you have to restore exactly the same volume roughly, and exactly the same pocket of fat from which the fat is resorbed. So you should be very accurate when you're treating the patients with fillers. So this is what it is. So when you're talking about lips, we usually undertreat the patients. Always remember, try to just undertreat, because you can always add the material into that area. Over treatment, then reversing. Remind you, when you're using hyaluronic acid, you can reverse the full treatment by injection of hyaluronidases, 1500 units in 1 ml of normal saline. But it's too much of a, kind of a patient loses confidence and all that. So it's always better to undertreat. And if patient says, doc, give me a little more puffiness over the lip, or I want a little more, then always you can augment. So try to be under corrective and then probably augment. All right, keep that as your protocol. So I don't know, I mean, how true. I just found in some literature that maximum of 2 ml of filler, not, I'm sorry, there's a spell mistake, per treatment, but I have seen people injecting 10 ml, 8 ml, anything. I have seen people injecting 12 ml also. So it depends upon the age of the patient, how much he needs actually to restore the volume, and which areas need, how much is the deficit, what are the patient's expectations. So it's all on that, all right? Do not inject into blood vessels. You should know your anatomy. There are various danger zones in the face, which I will discuss, that you should be very careful about, and you should avoid those areas. All right. In order to achieve godly results, don't try to put your patients in harm's way. Very, very important. All right. So these are the 4 techniques: linear threading, serial puncture, and cross hatching, and fan technique. So this is the picture that shows different types of techniques. All right. So whatever you are comfortable, and plus these techniques are, they can vary from the area where you're injecting also. All right. So these are the some dangerous, see the location of the facial artery as it is coming along the anterior border of the masseter muscle. It gives different branches. It gives the inferior labial, it gives the superior labial, it gives the lateral nasal, that becomes your angular artery. And angular artery just reaches, you can say, at the top of the nose here, at the root of the nose, gets joined by the supratrochlear and the supraorbital communications. So this area becomes very dangerous area, because if you're correcting a nasolabial fold and you go too high up, or you're correcting a tear trough and you inject into this artery, what can happen is the material will be deposited, and if you're using a syringe, the material gets deposited into the vessel, and due to the pressure, okay, this pressure is higher than the systolic pressure of the vessel at that time when the heart is beating. It will be pushed into the central system, and the filler in this area can easily go and get inside your retinal artery, which was the main reason that there have been cases of blindness. So you have to be very careful about glabella, temple. So I have marked these areas, nose. Okay, these are very, very dangerous areas. So you have to know your anatomy pit pat before injecting. Same thing, avoid massage for sleep, because you don't want filler to get displaced. Although filler does not bind to receptors, filler has got different properties. Okay, so fillers have got something known as coefficient of expansion, or the G prime, which is the most important factor that decides how much the filler will expand. All right. So expansion of the filler. So these fillers you need to use them in less volume, because it's going to expand once you inject them. So usually G prime value you have to see. It's written, all is written on the box of a filler. So what is the G prime? What is the cohesivity? Whether it's hydrophilic or hydrophobic. So all the factors you have to take into account, the area where you're going to inject it, whether that area and the amount that area requires. So all these calculations, depending on the area, depending on the needs of the patient, you have to consider before you start injecting your patients. Try to keep, again, it's same, try to keep pain medium. So because you're going to inject with a long cannula or a needle, patient is going to feel something. But the best part is that all these fillers do come with lignocaine in it. All right. So as you're injecting, patient is going to have less and less discomfort. All right. Okay, so avoid all these chemical peels and all those things, makeup and all that. All right. So what are the complications? They can be immediate, like pain, bruising, erythema, lumps and bumps, anaphylaxis, edema, acne. So we again wrote an article. You can go through it if you want. I can send you a copy. Filler emergency kit. Again, it got published into, I think, JAMA, Facial Plastic Surgery Journal. Dr. Nabil, me, and Karthik, and Dr. Carmen. So this is a very good article, and we wrote in that you should, whoever injects filler should have that those things in the kit. So just go through that article if you want. I'll send you the link later on. And in future or after a few years, somebody starts injecting, keep those materials ready because you never know when you need them. Late complication is inflammatory nodule, Tyndall effect. So what is Tyndall effect? Tyndall effect is basically when you're injecting very superficial. There's a bluish hue that comes because the light goes through and through, or light falls in it and gets reflected. So this area, mostly in cases when you're correcting the teardrop, so this area will look lightish blue compared to this. It is not aesthetic at all. So you should know that you have to control your depth of injection, telangiectasia, lipoatrophy, hypertrophy scar, or sterile abscesses. So conclusion is facial rejuvenation is an upcoming, absolutely, I totally agree, because you go to Middle East, nobody wants to be a plastic, nobody wants to be a general surgeon. Now everybody wants to inject Botox and fillers because that's probably the future. Everybody wants to go into aesthetics. Plastic dermats, maxillofacial, ENT, whoever is trained and confident and knows the anatomy in face should be injecting. That's my personal and opinion, and probably opinion of most of us. Take a proper documented consents for your patients, have a team and train them. Team means your nurse, who makes these injections, who has to make Botox for you. Your assistant who's going to help you for injecting, marking. Your pencils should be on your table. Your marking rulers, whatever, you vibrate a small vibrator which you use for vibrations on the skin, your AMLA. So all these things have to be arranged before you start injecting anyone. So in the end, I'll say every ending is really just a new beginning, especially when you talk about medical sciences or any subspecialty or super specialty. There's no end. All your life till your grave, you're going to learn and learn and learn. And never think that you know everything. It's just a matter of day when somebody will write an article and all whatever you knew is all outdated. And keep on reading, keep on upgrading, and try to learn irrespective of specialty. It can be plastic, it can be ENT. A person who has mastered that craft, you should, when you have acquired qualification, you should go and work with that patient and spend good number of years. Nothing comes fast. So good number of years, go abroad, learn from people, and then start injecting your patients slowly under guidance. This is my take on this topic. All right. So this is my whatever, the people who have trained me. This man is a very, very important man in my life, probably the most important, and I'm still very, very scared of him. Dr. Sultan Pradhan, Dr. Jatin Shah. So these people trained me for oncology. And Dr. Nabil Faki, Sir, Panda Sir, and Karthik knows, one of the opinion leaders in Mers. Mers is a company which makes this Balatiro fillers and Xeomin Botox. And Dr. Azmat Doctor, one of the best reconstructive surgeons, like Akshay Deshpande. All right, Akshay Deshpande is better, but same, kind of. So these are the 4 people who have trained me in these 2 kind of opposite direction subspecialties. And I thank Chirag and his team for inviting me. So we can take some questions now, Chirag. If somebody has a question. Chirag, you have to unmute yourself and keep the camera on now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, so there's one question which says difference between HA avian and HA bacterial.
What?
HA avian and HA bacterial.
I have no idea. I have to see.
Sir?
Actually, hyaluronic acid. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
See,
So I think
hyaluronic acid.
sorry, sir. Carry on.
So there are various sources from where hyaluronic acid is actually derived. Okay. So earlier days they used to use this animal derived hyaluronic acid. So that used to come from the rooster comb. That is why it was there HA avian. So today it is all recombinant, hyaluronic acid, basically the gram positive and the gram negative, which are the Streptococci zoo epidemicus, which is the source of basically the hyaluronic acid from which we get. So ideally, what happens during a process of manufacturing, this bacteria, they are actually cultured, and then they are fermented, and then they are extracted and purified, and that forms the hyaluronic acid powder. And then in that you add the solvent, and then you add something called as a cross linker. Cross linker is basically which binds this hyaluronic acid together. So the most commonly used cross linker which is today used is basically BDD. The basically, if you expand it, it's called 1,4-butadiol butaglycide, etc. So basically, it binds the what do you call, the hyaluronic acid molecules together so that they don't kind of disappear, and they don't kind of get dissolved by the body's hyaluronic acid, which is there already present in the body. So that is how it is made. So the difference is basically one was derived from rooster comb, so it is the avian, and the other one is bacterial, the Streptococci zoo epidemicus. That's the bacteria.
Arun sir, there's one more question specifically for you, that if someone needs just volume, for example, under the eye, would a single volume filler be better or a series of PRP?
So basically, PRP doesn't give volume, you see. So it basically improves the quality of the skin.
Quality.
Quality of the skin. So it all depends upon what we are targeting. Are you targeting the improvement of the skin, or you're targeting to improve onto the volume loss there? So if you want to improve the volume loss, so you have options like doing a filler with a so you have to understand, I think, as Dr. Deepak mentioned, there are various properties of a filler. So you have to see the cohesivity, we have to see the viscosity, you have to see the concentration, you have to see the cross linking. And so what happens is you have to see a filler material which has got a less G prime, that is less hardness, and which is smaller concentration, and it should be there, so that, because what happens is if you're using a tighter this thing, you might be having a lot of volume which you don't want it at the tear trough area. So you can use a higher concentration once in Miller augmentations and other things, but not in the tear trough area. The other way of improving the volume today is basically by threads. So there are various PDO threads, polydioxazine threads, which can be used in the tear trough areas or on the dorsum of the nose, which also augments those areas, and they are less, as Dr. Deepak was mentioning, there are chances of blindness and all those things in the areas where there are vessels which can occlude on the central retinal artery if you are occluding onto the branches of the facial artery. So basically, yeah, so that is how you augment. So what was the question? Sorry, I think I could answer your question.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
PRP versus
So PRP basically doesn't give you volume; it just improves onto the quality of the skin and volume.
Yeah. So now if there's a patient, a 20-year-old versus a 40-year-old, a 20-year-old would want a healthy skin, but they wouldn't want something to correct the wrinkles, or they wouldn't have any volume deficit at this point of time. Whereas that same person at a 40-year-old would have wrinkles and volume deficit. So what would your plan of action be for a daughter and a mother who would visit you? Arun sir and Deepak sir.
Deepak, you answering?
Sir, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so now we have to understand certain things, that after the age of 20-25, we start losing 1% of collagen every year from our skin. Okay, so now when the patient comes to you, who is at the age of 20-25, I mean, you mentioned daughter, so her level of collagen, her level of fat on her, as Dr. Deepak was mentioning, you have the superficial fat and the deep fat, and you have resorption of the fats there, and you start kind of sagging skin and all those things. So you start getting, at the mother comes to you, you have jowls formed and all those things, sagging skin and all those things. So if you're looking at three things basically, now are you looking at basically the skeletal resorption, are you looking at the fat which has been resorbed, or are you looking at the skin? Skin means you have lost a lot of collagen there, If you're talking about the fat pads, you're talking about losing the volume on the fat pads there, or there could be resorption at the skeletal level. So you have to decide and analyze. You have lost the volume. You are going to take care of the skin there, or you're going to take care of the resorption of the bone. Now, on a practical note, when the patient comes to you, if a patient is like 20, 25 years, where she has not lost a lot of volume, where she has not lost a lot of collagen, so all you have to do is just, kind of give them home care products, and you start telling them and you advise them how to take care of the skin, how to keep on inducing collagen. You losing collagen is something different. Like, you have to tell them to use regular sun protection. You have to keep them using retinoic acid, night application, sun protection, and all those things. And the mother comes to you, you have to treat them accordingly. If they've lost the volume, you're going to use fillers or whatever it is. If they have like less collagen, they have wrinkles. Wrinkles doesn't mean you have to do Botox. So you have many other procedures. You can do high intensity focused ultrasound. You can do microneedling. You can do many things which is today available. And we do all those procedures. You can actually improve onto the. So you see, there are a variety of things which you can do for the mother, and for the daughter, you have to kind of train them and put them on skincare products and things like that. And of course, you can do certain amount of chemical peels and all those things, kind of keep them healthy, the skin in healthy condition.
So for Botox and fillers, what would you recommend, needles or cannulas?
That depends upon the person who is injecting. I think Dr. Deepak should answer because.
So I prefer cannula. See, I don't want even one person to become blind till I'm doing all this. So for me, better to be safe. Cannula is the thing, and I have enjoyed. I have only injected with cannula, so I'm quite happy with cannulas. Unless there is no other option, sometimes you have to inject to correct static wrinkles somewhere here. So there's no way you can, come above the head and all that and inject with a blunt thing. It's very difficult. So sometimes when there is an access problem into an anatomical area and you feel it's going to make your task much difficult, then probably you can inject with a needle, taking Lord's almighty name. But because you can't see, they are all blind injections. Otherwise, cannula. My thing, and I was taught with a cannula by Nabil sir. So Dr. Nabil taught us with cannula. So I am a cannula man.
So technical way, what is Tyndall effect and ecchymosis? Like, is there a difference or it's the same?
Ecchymosis is subdermal bruising, basically. It's hemochromatosis, means you cause bleeding because there is a either trauma or micro trauma or whatever. Tyndall effect is because of wrong injection. Okay, where there is a bluish hue to the skin when the light falls onto it. Okay, so it gives a very unaesthetic look to the patient. All right, so you will have a light blue area. So for example, you're correcting tear trough, and you don't inject, you are too superficial, mostly too superficial. So what will happen? The light will go through and through. Okay, and it gets reflected back in the form of blue light. Okay, which looks quite bluish. It is very, very as if somebody has hit you in that area. So that is known as the Tyndall effect. Panda sir can even explain better, I feel, if he wants to take this.
No, I think that's fine. I mean, that is what it is.
So
Tyndall effect is basically if you place it more superficially, yeah.
Yeah.
So now if somebody wants to start their practice in Botox and fillers, and if they get a patient, what would be the way forward? Like how would your consulting go? Dr. Panda, Dr. Deepak, Akshay sir, or Weber sir, if you all can elaborate on that. How would your consulting start, or if you can just give some insight to the participants?
So I follow ABCD, Chirag. Assess the patient. Okay. Budget, B. C is patient's main concerns, and D is devices. Am I ready? So these four are I love this technique of ABCD, and I can remember. Basically, it's very easy to remember ABCD. So I'll go with this, and Dr. Panda and Akshay sir can also comment on that accordingly.
Panda sir, what do you feel?
Where is Vaibhav?
Vaibhav sir? Hello?
He's unmuted.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Vaibhav sir. Sir, how would you start your consulting?
Vaibhav, there's a kid behind you. We have to mute the kid. Yeah.
Vaibhav sir,
yes,
how would you start your consulting practice for Botox and fillers? Like, how would you start talking to the patient, if you could just elaborate that on for a bit.
I think first of all, once you will interact with the patient, you will come to know that how much patient is aware about, like, or he is just unaware what is Botox, what is fillers. So
Okay.
first thing is you have to understand whatever the requirement of the patient. Undoubtedly, the patient chief complaint is always important. No matter you are good with a filler or a
Hello, Vaibhav sir.
Yes, to unmute
Yeah.
himself.
Now we can hear you, sir.
Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yes, Vaibhav sir, now we can hear you.
Yeah, most important part is you have to understand the chief complaint of the patient.
Okay.
And if you can address that, then only you go ahead. And once you know what is the chief complaint of the patient, and you feel like you cannot, the patient cannot be much beneficiary with the Botox fillers, you ask them not to do it. It is very important. And the secondly, once you know what is the chief complaint, then you have to understand how much patient is aware about the Botox and the fillers. Because most of the time, patient is also not aware what is Botox and what is filler, what it can be, where it can be used. So you have to understand first, like how much patient is knowledgeable about it. Mostly the young crowd you will come to they all are very, very well educated, and they nowadays come for the facial sculpting. So, they know they want to go for all these procedures. While little aged people, they just say, because I have got done my Botox filler and, some few months back with this particular doctor, that particular doctor, I want to repeat it. So it is like you have to understand the chief complaint, and undoubtedly you have to address the chief complaint of the patient first.
Okay. Vaibhav sir, I think your line is getting.
You can't hear me?
Okay. Deepak sir.
Yeah, tell me. So question is Botox cost, right? Somebody is asking.
Okay.
Yeah, so it depends on the product you're buying. It's somewhere around 50 unit vial. As far as I remember, it's around say 9,500 to 11,000, good one. So depends on what you're buying and all that, and what deals you have with the guy who's giving it to you. So if you're injecting quite a big numbers, I think Panda sir and Vaibhav does quite a bit of it. So I think you can negotiate them depending on the number of vials you're taking. Any other question? Ask Akshay also, no? How does he decide this?
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear
Hi,
me?
Akshay. Yeah.
Hi. Very nice presentation, Deepak.
Thank you.
And it is very good for introduction and to get oriented and to know how to proceed with the Botox and fillers. And the way Chirag asked me regarding practice. So the best way is you should make some pamphlets, brochures, materials, which will help you during the counseling. Right, Chirag? That was the question you were asking now when you start practice, right?
Yes.
No. His question is that how do you talk to your patient on the first consultation of Botox or filler?
Yeah. So, right. So, during first consultation, Deepak, the way you said ABCD, so I will go with assessment. Then the next thing will be requirement. What is his desires? And then we'll come to the costing. So you give the patient all options, and then according to option he can choose. But this is the way it can go. The way as per the patient's desire and requirement. But first, it's better to ask him what is his problem, what he wants, and then we later tell him these are the things. What is other things are also there. Those patients who do not notice now and may notice later. So I think that is the way to go about it. I think so.
Okay. Any other question, Chirag? Chirag, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. So one last question. What is the filler dissolving protocol? Second last. What is the filler dissolving protocol?
So you have something known as hyaluronidases, 1500 units. You can dissolve hyaluronic acid based fillers. You can't dissolve synthetic fillers. So you inject in that same area depending upon how much you have injected volume. So approximately it's always the same. Okay, and then you just wait. You can easily, within 24 hours, most of the filler gets dissolved. Okay, so 1 ml into 1500 units. That's how you, most of the prescribed whatever the way it should be mixed is with 1 ml of normal saline to 1500 units of injection hyaluronidase. And it is an animal compound, and you get it from the testicles of a goat, this hyaluronic acid. Unfortunately, this is what we use in these patients, you know.
Chirag, unmute yourself.
Saurabh, you wanted to ask something? Yeah.
Sir, so this is a aesthetic procedure. So suppose if complication occurs, it scares the patient most. So in this situation, how to counsel the patient?
Okay, so your Saurabh, your consulting for cosmetic work is totally different from your consulting for other surgeries. That's what I told you. You have to spend time.
Yeah, sir, correct, sir. Sir, how to counsel patient in case of the complication, or we should tell the patient about the complication before the procedure. But by doing that, we might just lose some of the patients.
No. So in
So how to
cosmetic,
go? What is the trick? What is the trick?
so so the thing is, for my patients, whatever I have operated, I do tell them everything. I take consent for all the complications that can be expected from the procedure, and I do not hide anything. That's very important. It's cosmetic work. They want to enhance their look, you know. And I never tell them. This is very important. I learned through probably 5-6 years of my practice into this. Never tell the patient, I will make you look better. I just tell them you have lost fat in this area. You need a filler shot. It will make you look better. You never tell them I'll make you like something. So this has to be very clear to the patient, because patient will always say, or he will or she will have a mobile and record what you're saying. So in Middle East, nowadays, they have started recording consultations with the patients, even in the US and Europe. So you record it, record the conversation when you're having with the counseling, so that patient can never come tomorrow and say, you never told me all this. You know?
So basically, CCTV is required in your consultation room.
Not only that, you can record it with the phone or whatever, or you take a written consent for all problems that can be expected. And if there is a complication, depending on what is the complication, you treat it accordingly. See, that's why you should know each and everything about the product you're injecting, the things that can happen, and then what is your backup plan B.
Correct. The plan B is the most important.
Yeah, because you don't see, if you have caused, so for example, in a small vessel, and you cause necrosis at the tip of the nose, when you're injecting on the dorsum of the nose, you have injected in some vessel. The vessels are very small, and you have injected or caused an injury to the vessel, which was the main vessel, to the tip of the nose, and tip of the nose is gone. It's a big problem for a cosmetic patient. So you should definitely try to avoid these things and be as cautious as possible. See, always underdo it, I feel, rather than overdo it. This is very important in cosmetic. On the other side, tumor work or aggressive surgeries, you know what we do. So it's the other way around. But in this, it's a totally, even if I do a facelift, I've done a few cases. I have always realized, you have to be very patient. So patience is there. You should have very good light. You have good magnification. All right.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Anything else?
Any other questions, Chirag?
I think that's about it. Thank you, Dr. Arun sir, Akshay sir, Vaibhav sir, Parth, Saurabh, and a big thank you for Deepak sir to agree to do this introductory course. And
there's one last question.
How much does Botox cost?
One unit of Botox costs how much from someone?
So it depends. If Panda sir is injecting, it will be expensive, and if I will be injecting, it will be less. So it depends on the experience, depends upon the product you are using. So it can vary, but somewhere around 400 per unit to 380 or whatever. That's the cost nowadays. Huh? If I'm not wrong, Panda sir, 400 rupees per unit.
So can I answer this question?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Everybody's listening. Okay. So as Dr. Deepak was mentioning, there are various brands of botulinum toxin which is today available in the market. It is like Nobel Biocare implant or Adin implant or Dentium implants or whatever it is. So the company Allergan, which produces the brand called Botox, they sell at around 17,500 per unit per vial of 100 units. So divide 17,500 divided by 100, basically how much? Say about 180 rupees per unit. Okay. The same while if you take a Korean company, say I am a key opinion leader for a company called CX. It's a Korean product. So I have done a lot of work on that product, and I have actually compared it with many other. I'm not talking about that talking on the platform, but I'm just telling you the cost of that 100 units is about 10,000 rupees. So that's about 100 rupees divided by 100. It's about 100 rupees per unit. So again, if you calculate that as Xeomin or Disport or whatever, so you have to calculate accordingly. 100 units divided by, I mean, X amount divided by 100. So that becomes your per unit cost. And then you have to calculate what is the amount of units you're going to inject. For example, if I'm injecting just for the masseter, for example, if I'm going to inject masseter, so I'll be injecting about 25 units, 25 units, that's about 50 units. So I have to calculate this way that I'm going to inject 50 units. So my cost is basically, if I'm injecting, say, for example, CX, the cost for me is 10,000 divided by 100, it's about, divided by 100, it's about 100 rupees into 50, that's about 5,000 rupees is my cost. And then I have to charge accordingly. But I have to remember one more thing, that do I have a patient to follow up with this? Because if I do not have a second patient, this thing is going to go waste. Another 50 units is going to go waste. So what do I do with that? Am I going to inject it on myself, on my wife, on my friends? Whatever it is going to be free of cost. So that means I'm not even going to recover. So even if I'm charging double or triple or 4 times, double if I'm charging, I'm not earning anything. You see, it's going to be the cost. 3 times, it's going to be hardly anything, because you're going to lose that 50 units. So there's a lot of things you have to consider before you have to calculate this thing. Do you have a patient to follow up? Okay, that's we're talking about masseter. If I'm just going to do for a gummy smile, I'm going to inject. My protocol says I have to inject 4 units on right, 4 units on the left. So that's 8 units. So 8 units means what? 800 rupees. What about the rest of the 9,200 rupees? That's I'm going to throw it off. So do I have a patient following up with me, or I have another patient? So you have to calculate all the situations. I hope I'm clear with that.
Yeah. Okay. I think, sir, all the questions are done.
Okay, can we have all people who participated on screen? Chirag, tell him to just unmute, and we'll just say bye. And if ask them personally again, do they want to ask directly? You can unmute and you can, show. You can just.
Yes, sir. All unmuted.
Doing that, sir.
Okay.
I'm unmuting everyone, whoever is there.
Okay, so any of you want to ask us anything, or Dr. Panda, or me, or Vaibhav, anything, or Akshay?
No, just a second. Everyone is getting unmuted.
Okay, Chirag. So better is, because we're getting a lot of sound now. So you just again mute them and you ask them, and then we just say bye bye and we leave. All right.
Yes, I think that would be better.
Because I'm hearing all these funny sounds.
Yeah.
Panda sir and Vaibhav can be on, and others can be.
Yeah. Okay. So, sir, I think. Yeah. So we're not getting any questions. If there is, I will forward it to you directly now. And,
so I just tell you, Chirag, I can't see you. You have removed my video. Okay. So the thing is, you can see me.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay.
Sir.
So my takeaway message from this talk, small introduction, is that this is a very upcoming branch, especially for ENT surgeons and maxillofacial, because all over the world, what I am seeing, people from very extensive surgeries are going to facial plastic surgery. All right. So if you have this in your mind, you do your masters, do your super specialization, and then train with somebody who's a very good injector, and then start. I am totally against somebody who's not really qualified and who is not trained but is misguided or informed that he or she is allowed. At graduate level, for now, you are not allowed to inject outside on the face, near the eyes, or anywhere on the face. So please remember this.